Welcome everyone. Appreciate you all joining the session. We have a pretty strict schedule and a lot of content to go through, so I'm going to get right into it, and we're going to be going pretty quickly for the next hour. Quick intro, just to expand upon that. Gabe Welp, BI practice leader at Amend Consulting. We're right over on Reading Road, right across from the casino. Manfred Consulting Company. I specialize in business intelligence solutions, whether that's the actual development of analytics for a company or just strategy around how do you successfully deploy business intelligence platforms across an organization. I definitely specialize in Microsoft Power BI, which is one component of the Power Platform that we are going to be talking about. I have the great honor to teach pretty much every 6 weeks or so Power BI courses with the UC Center for Business Analytics. So maybe many of you, or at least folks at your company, have taken those courses with me. One of my favorite things to do. Very average marathon runner, I'd like to add that. I have one coming up in 6 weeks that I'm a little bit nervous about, but we'll be okay. All right, so agenda for today. So I don't want to talk too much conceptually around the Power Platform. We'll do that for about 5 or 10 minutes. My main goal today is to walk through a technical solution with a identified business problem and walk through and showcase how can the Power Platform be used today for folks to develop solutions at their company using low-code or no-code tools. And really, we're going to talk a lot about how Power Platform has grown over the last couple of years and how it's trying to democratize data for an organization to successfully use very, very complex, whether it's machine learning or artificial intelligence models, how we're going to be able to use that across an organization, even for folks who may not have traditional programming experience, developer experience, so on and so forth. We'll have 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. We're going to try to keep to that as close as possible. All right, so the business problem that we're going to use to kind of facilitate the demonstration today. I'm going to assume I'm a sales and marketing analyst at a mid-sized firm, and my company provides technical-oriented courses for organizations. So courses on machine learning, Python, so on and so forth. We provide those in a virtual capacity. And we are trying to become more data-driven and better at analyzing both internal and external data to do a couple of different things. We're going to try to get insights into our sales pipeline. So we're going to look at all of our sales history, our opportunities coming out of our CRM. We're going to try to become smarter and determine how, or what are the factors that lead an opportunity to actually generate into a sale, or turn into a sale. What drives that? How can we proactively predict that in the future? We're going to do some analysis on our marketing campaigns. So we're going to analyze our spend. We're going to analyze the sales that were associated with that marketing campaign. We're going to use that to predict what marketing campaigns we should do in the future. We want to start analyzing external data as well. And so we're going to leverage Google search trending data to identify hot markets that our sales and marketing departments can go after to try to increase sales. And we want to evaluate the sentiment of survey data for the courses that we give. So we provide a survey at the end of each course. We want to extract useful information from that the survey information. And then really across all this, we want to make this as automated as possible. We don't have a ton of headcount or extra capacity at our organization. We really want to improve efficiencies and start to generate these insights proactively in an automated fashion. Okay, so for this analysis, I have access to some internal data, so data on our sales pipeline, both for current and historical opportunities. We have survey data for the courses that we provide. We have marketing campaign information, the spend that we have, the sales that were generated from those campaigns. We have our upcoming marketing campaigns that we have budgeted for the next year that we want to determine, hey, is this the right decision? Do we want to move forward with these campaigns? And then we're going to use just some external data today, that Google trending, web search data. And really across this entire business problem, and one of the huge value statements as we'll talk through with the Power Platform, our team in this business problem is non-technical in nature. So we are very limited in terms of our technical expertise. We have some basic Excel skills, but we don't have a ton of programming experience We don't have a ton of traditional development experience, and we want to try to complete this analysis internally. We don't have budget to hire or contract data scientists or developers. And so we're about to take on a big undertaking. We don't have traditional programming experience. How do we do that? What are our options out there? And that is where the Microsoft Power Platform comes in. Okay, so many of you may be using some of the products in the Power Platform today at your organizations. You've probably at least heard of Power BI before, but the Power Platform is a group of products all packaged together by Microsoft, and the description they provide up in the top right is that the goal of the Power Platform is to empower everyone at your organization with an intuitive, collaborative, and extensible platform of low-code tools that make it easy to create efficient and flexible solutions. Big piece there is that all of these products work in combination with one another, and they're all set up as low-code or no-code tools designed for normal business analysts as opposed to traditional programmers or resources in IT. Okay? Power Platform, we're designed to analyze data through the use of Power BI, where we can start to generate insights, generate automated reporting and analysis with our information, act on data by developing low-code applications using Power Apps, as we'll see, automate various processes by creating either cloud-based flows in Power Automate or utilizing a lot of the RPA capabilities in Power BI or Power Automate Desktop, as we'll show in the example today, and then also assist customers and employees to handle standard inquiries through intelligent chatbots using the Power Platform as well. Okay. So a couple core principles that we're going to see through the demonstration. So when Microsoft strategized around the Power Platform and how it kind of sells itself to the market is that Microsoft is trying to develop a suite of products, a suite of technology solutions that can and should be developed by the business, not just by IT professionals, not just by data scientists, but folks throughout the organization in different roles, different capacities, with different levels of expertise in terms of working with data and some technical-oriented skills. Okay. Data and systems should be streamlined, connected, and intuitive for end users. That is the number one thing that we're going to see in the demonstration, is that these tools are designed to be extremely intuitive for end users, where we're going to be able to develop a huge, complex, end-to-end solution, really without writing a single line of code. Okay. Systems should be unified with single sources of truth, and then above all, that last point here, traditional, complex machine learning and data science techniques should not just be leveraged by your data science team or your analytics team, but that these models can be reused and leveraged by non-technical resources in certain capacities. We're going to go through a bunch of examples here where we see that. Okay. A couple more things before we get into the demonstration. The Power Platform is designed to connect to hundreds and hundreds of external data sources. So your company's ERP systems, databases, your local files, all can be ingested into the Power Platform, and then all of those products can leverage that information, can streamline processes with that, can build apps on top of it, can analyze that information through Power BI. There are tons and tons of use cases, many of which your organizations might be using today. And then what we're going to use in a handful of situations are pre-built artificial intelligence models built into the Power Platform products. The functionality is called the AI Builder. We'll see some use cases really across all three products that we're going to be working with today: Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. And there's a ton of different functionalities here, whether it's text recognition, trying to extract information from PDFs or invoices in an automated capacity. Object recognition, whether you're trying to use computer vision to identify inventory counts or whatever it may be. Prediction, forecasting, and sentiment analysis. We'll see some of those today. We'll see how we can leverage these really complex pre-built artificial intelligence models, configure them based on the business problem that we're trying to solve, and we don't have to know how to do the coding in the background. Microsoft is going to handle that for us. Okay. And then across the board with these three tools, they are continuing to kind of lead the market in their respective industries. Power BI specifically, Power BI is definitely the #1 rated tool out in the marketplace today. More and more companies are migrating away from their legacy BI systems and using Microsoft Power BI as their analytics platform for the business. That continues to increase every single year. We see more and more clients and more organizations migrating away from Tableaus, Qliks, whatever it may be, and adopting Power BI. Power BI has been around since 2015. Power Apps and Power Automate, the two other main products of the Power Platform, are much newer. They were first released in 2019, but at that point, they were really, essentially beta versions of the products they are today. And so over the course of the last couple of years, they have increased in market share and their functionality, and they continue to gain more and more traction in the marketplace, continue to be rated more and more highly, and they're now considered, both of those products, really at the the peak of their respective industries. Okay, so we are about to start the technical component of this. As we will see, the Power Platform is designed to work with external data, to ingest information into the Microsoft ecosystem, and then all of these products are designed to work in combination with one another, all in a very intuitive, low-code, no-code environment with literally, hundreds and hundreds of potential use cases. Okay, so for today, if I go back and I think about the business problem, what we're trying to solve, we want to get insights into our sales pipeline. We want to analyze our marketing campaigns. We want to start leveraging external data to understand where there are hot markets in some of the courses that we provide. We want to evaluate the sentiment of our courses, and we want to automate processes around the extraction of this data, the analysis of this data, and actually taking action on this data as well. So for the sake of time, I've started today, and we have a couple of different data sources that we're going to review, and I've already ingested that into the Power BI environment through a functionality called Power BI Data Flows. And so for each one of these, I have just ingested exports of data that we have captured in a OneDrive folder. And we'll take a look at this information very quickly. For those who aren't familiar with Power BI or specifically the Power Query interface here, this is Microsoft's ETL engine that's used in tons of different Microsoft products. Again, just like everything else we're going to see, it's a very low-code environment. It's very intuitive for end users, and it's in a great spot to do pretty complex ETL with your data without having to write any code from scratch. Okay? And so for our marketing campaign data, we have two different data sources here where I've done some basic transformations. We have historical campaigns where we can look through all of our historical marketing campaigns, 4,572 of them, and we can see the spend in thousands in terms of where did we actually allocate our marketing budgets or our marketing dollars. Some of that would be in TV advertising, some of that would be in radio advertising, and some of that would be in social media advertising. We have categorized whether we used an influencer for those marketing campaigns and classified what type. And then we have the associated sales in thousands for that marketing campaign as well. So we know the spend, and we know what sales were attributed to that campaign. Then we have a list of 50 upcoming trainings, or 50 upcoming campaigns, I should say, all pertaining to a specific training that our company provides. We have the budgeted spend for TV, radio, and social media that we're expecting to spend for these campaigns. And we don't know what sales will be attributed just yet. We will try to predict that here in just a few minutes. Okay? So that's one of our data sources. We have information on our sales pipeline as well that we pulled from our CRM system. Okay? We made a handful of transformations to this data coming from OneDrive, and at this point we have 9,240 different opportunities, and a bunch of data points around each one of those opportunities. Where did that lead come from? How often have they visited our website? How much time did they spend on our website? What was their most recent activity? What type of job do they have? What type of role do they have? What interests have they specified through our conversations with them and through their interactions with our organization to date? And then specifically, key field here is for all of these historical opportunities, we know whether this opportunity was converted into a sale for the organization. So we have a data set of 9,000 and some records, and we know for each one of them whether that opportunity was converted into a sale or not. And then the last data set we have here is where we capture our survey data for each one of the trainings that we teach, where we just have identified what course the review was associated with, and then a free-form response that lets someone, free-form comments around their experience with the course, their thoughts, that we're going to try to extract insights from in an automated capacity. Okay, so we have a ton of information. We don't have traditional programming experience at our company. We can't pull this into Python. We can't do a bunch of data exploration in Python and run different regressions, run different modeling against that. We don't have that skill set, at our company. But through the Power Platform, they know that organizations, and as we move forward, organizations are trying to allow more folks throughout the business to generate insights into data that they work with, to become more efficient, more effective with their decision making, and not have to rely solely on an analytics department, solely on an IT team to do that heavy lifting. And so what the Power BI product has introduced over the last 2 to 3 years is that we can actually use automated machine learning models and apply that to our data without having to write any of the code from scratch. Okay? And so I'm going to start with that campaign information. Remember, that shows our spend for each campaign and what sales were attributed to that. And I can say I want to leverage a pre-built machine learning model on that data. Power BI is going to ask me some basic questions. What table do I want to reference? I'm going to reference that historical campaign. And then what column do I care about the most? Do I care about the sales? Do I care about the conversion, whatever it may be? For this historical campaign data, I want to analyze that sales column and what sales were attributed to each one of those campaigns. Okay. And then Power BI, while we're waiting here for this to refresh, it will very quickly do a couple different things in the background. It will take a look at what field you specified, and it will try to identify a model or a machine learning model that you might want to apply to that data. Okay? And because we chose a numeric column, we chose that sales column, it's going to say, hey, you probably will want to use a regression model against that data. We'll click OK. It's already done some basic analysis to determine correlations between our other columns in the data and our outcome column, that sales column. And so it's going to already give us a kind of a head start of what columns we might want to leverage in a regression model. We can modify that. We can remove or add columns depending on our knowledge of our own data. I'll keep what they have here right now. And then we're going to name our model, and I'm going to call this campaign analysis. And then we can choose how long we want to let an automated machine learning model run in the background against our data. Okay? We only have a couple thousand records, so I'll keep it at the standard 120 minutes. It's actually going to take 4 to 5 minutes. And when I click Save and Train, Power BI in the background is automatically going to split our data into training and testing data, and it's going to start running a bunch of pre-built machine learning models against that data. We're going to let it run for about 4 to 5 minutes. I'll come back and take a look at the results, and we'll get insights into what actually happened in this 4 to 5 minute period. What did Power BI do? What models did it apply to our data? And how is that actually going to help us apply any information or any of that output to our actual data moving forward. Okay. So while that's running, we're going to take a look at our sales pipeline data as well. And real quick, remember the sales pipeline data is all of our historical opportunities, and we know whether that opportunity was converted into a sale or not. Okay. And so we're going to run a machine learning model against that data as well. And we're going to say the column we care about, our outcome column, is that converted column. Okay. That binary 0 or 1, whether that opportunity was converted into a sale. Based on that selection, Power BI is going to recommend that we use a binary prediction model to predict whether or not an outcome will be achieved, whether or not an opportunity will be converted into a sale. We're going to say we care most about when an opportunity was converted into a sale and has that value of 1. And then we're going to label this and say, if it is converted into a sale, we want to call that converted to sale. And if not, we're going to call that not converted to sale. Okay. Just like before, Power BI is going to do quick analysis in the background, determine correlations between our different data points, recommend columns that it thinks we should use in a binary prediction model. We can modify this if we want to. I'm going to keep the recommended selections here. Click Next, name my model. I'll call this conversion predictor. And we're going to let that machine learning model begin and start running in the background against our data. That'll take just a couple minutes to complete. So while we let those models actually work against our data, let's open up a blank Power BI desktop file. And this is where we actually extract data into Power BI. This is where we build reports. This is where we build our analysis. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ingest data from those data flows that we just took a look at that I created here in this exercise. And for now, while we let those models run against our campaign data and our sales pipeline data, I'm going to pull in this review by training table that pulls in all of our reviews for each one of our courses that we've conducted. Okay. So in the Power BI environment, again, with really no coding experience, not being able to use Python, not being able to use R, not being able to use other tools like this, Power BI has a couple different pre-built AI models that we're going to be able to run against our data. Okay. So, mentioned it before, but some of these pre-built models, we can do sentiment analysis, we can do image tagging, we can do language detection, we can try to extract key phrases from free-form text, and we're going to use this sentiment analysis pre-built model to try to quickly extract what is the sentiment of these reviews. Are they positive? Are they negative? And we want to highlight the trainings that we could remove and discontinue from our offerings. And so really with just a couple clicks of the mouse, no coding necessary, I can click on this review column and say, I want to use a pre-built AI model. I'm going to say, I want to analyze this text. And then we are going to leverage this pre-built model that allows us to generate a score sentiment for that natural language. I click OK. That's going to start that function in that model to apply to that data based on, hundreds of thousands of different iterations. Microsoft has done this natural language processing. It's going to allow us to apply this model to our own data, really with just 2 clicks of a mouse. Here in about 5 seconds, we're going to be able to see the output of that. It has quickly analyzed and iterated through every record in our data set. It's used that pre-built model, and it's allowed us to create this score sentiment. And we're going to be able to aggregate and start to identify trends in our trains. Yep.
Is this an add-on app or it's just with the general?
It's part of the standard platform. Yep, basically everything that we're showing today. There are like licensing requirements that we can talk through later, but it's all part of the built-in products for the Power Platform. Okay. All right, so I ran that model. We're going to load that data into our Power BI desktop file. And while we do that, let's go back and see whether those machine learning models actually finished applying to our data. Okay. So we see still refreshing for our sales pipeline data, but for our campaign data, we actually already had that machine learning model, or machine learning models applied to our data. And so what we can do is we can go review the output of that. If I click on this campaign analysis machine learning model that we generated, I can view this pre-built training report that's going to walk us through exactly what happened in the background when we said apply a regression model against our data. We can see the different steps that Power BI did in the background, and we can see what the output of that is, and we can actually apply that to our data, or really any data that we have inside of our data flow to start to become more efficient predicting upcoming promotions and campaigns. Okay? So keep in mind, we made a couple clicks, did no coding at all, and what we'll see right now is that Power BI created a model that predicted the sales amount for 913 testing rows, and the model that was created accounts for 92% of the variation in that output column. We can see a couple different metrics here, some visuals that help tell the story of our model. We can see the top predictors in our data set. We can see, for each one of these, how that ends up being correlated with our output column or our sales column. You can see that TV is definitely our top predictor, how much we spend in TV advertising. We can take a look at this training details, and this is actually where it gets really cool. We can see that out of our 4,565 rows of data, Power BI split that up into 80% training data, 20% testing data. We can see over those 3,000, for our 3,652 training rows, we ran 25 different machine learning models against our data in that 3 to 4 minute period. Okay. We can see the output and the model quality for each one of those. After the 25th or so, Power BI determined that it wasn't going to get any more accurate with the information that we had. And then as we look down even further below, we can start to see a couple different data points of how Power BI handled when we had null values and various elements of the model as well. And what we can do, of those 25 different models, Power BI landed on an extra trees regressor model as the most accurate way to predict sales for our marketing campaigns. And we can say, all right, we want to apply that model that was done for us all within the Power Platform. We want to apply that model to our upcoming campaigns. And we want to predict, based off this model and based off our budgeted spend that we're expecting for our upcoming campaigns, we want to predict what sales will be generated from those. Okay. And so I'm going to say I want to apply that model and generate a predicted sales column in our data. All right, we're going to let the sales pipeline model run for just a couple minutes. I'm going to show with the exact same data what was outputted. little bit earlier on, just so that we can see what that looks like. It will be essentially exactly the same when that model completes. But if I look at my sales pipeline data, and I look at the same data set where we did the exact same process here, I can look at that training report for our conversion predictor model, where we're trying to predict whether an opportunity will be converted into a sale. Again, that entire model was run for us without really doing any coding ourselves. And what we'll see is that Power BI generated a model. Our area under the curve is 86%, so pretty good there. It took our data and split it into training and testing data, 80-20, just like we saw for the regression analysis. Of our 18,048 records of testing data, we can take a look at this, this confusion matrix, and we can see really how our model did actually compare to what happened in real life. We can compare the accuracy, and we can see out of the just over 700 records of testing data that actually converted to a sale, our model correctly predicted 540 of those, and 176 were predicted incorrectly. For our just over 1,000 records that were not converted to a sale, our model incorrectly predicted 207 of those, and correctly predicted 925 of those. Okay? We can make a few adjustments to this model. We can identify whether we want to weight precision or recall in our model, depending on the business problem, depending on the context of what we're trying to, to do with this information. We can see an accuracy report that tells us a ton of information about how accurate our model is, how can we evaluate that, how can we assess that. We can take a look at our training details. Again, for this data, there were 44 different iterations run, 44 different models applied to our data. And really, at the end of that, instead of just picking the model that, the single model that had the highest accuracy of compared to our testing data, Power BI is actually going to create, in this case, an ensemble machine learning model. And so out of those 44 different iterations, it ran a bunch of different types of machine learning models against our data. And then it's actually weighting those different machine learning models appropriately based on the results. And so our end result, this model that's going to be applied to our data, every single time we refresh our data, is going to be an ensemble of 10 to 15 different unique machine learning models, all that were generated, all without us having to write a single piece of code against our data. All that's going to be done through the Power Platform. And just like before, we'll be able to apply that information, apply that model against our data. So the one that we created just a few minutes ago, that just finished up. We can take a look at that training report really quickly. The results should be very similar, and then we're going to apply that model to our data. So now we have ingested some data that we have, some internal data, without having to open up Python or anything like that. We've applied a huge laundry list of machine learning models against that data. We've applied that model to our data, and now we're going to ingest that in Power BI Desktop, build a report very quickly to help us identify different campaigns that we may or may not want to pursue over the next year. We're going to analyze our opportunities and try to proactively identify the leads that we should be reaching out to and contacting based on whether we predicted them to be converted. We'll be able to do a couple other things as well. Okay. So similar results here. We won't go through that all again. All I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this model to our data, and I'm going to say, I want to create a column in my table called predicted conversion that's going to output the probability that our lead gets converted into a sale, and then we're going to also generate a column called true or false whether it gets converted to a sale or not, and we're going to say anything over 50% probability we want to assume will be converted into a sale. All right, so we pull that information in. So now I'm going to go back to Power BI Desktop. I'm going to pull up my report. Okay, we got 10 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show an output that I already created in Power BI Desktop. Bunch of cool things here. And so we ingested this data. For anyone who works with Power BI at their own organization, they'll know it's a very, very intuitive tool. It's designed for business analysts. It's not designed for, well, certainly, programmers and IT professionals can use it, but it's designed for folks with less technical expertise. Some of the really impressive updates made to the platform is that even though there was a very, very small learning curve compared to other products to understand how to leverage Power BI to do analysis against your data, what Microsoft is introducing really just in the last couple months is the ability to create metrics, create calculations without having to learn the formula language in Power BI, but instead just writing a natural language like a chat GPT, what type of metric you want to create. And I'm going to say, I want to calculate the average score sentiment for my data, okay? And so I don't know how to write the metric, I don't know what functions to use, but I know I want to find what the average score sentiment is for my data. I'll click generate, and what Power BI is going to do is it's going to process that natural language, and it's going to generate a formula for me that I can modify. And I'll say, I want to add that data into my report. I can modify the calculation, I can modify the name, but instead of having to learn the code from scratch, again, we're just going to use natural language to identify what type of metric we want to create. And inside the platform, Microsoft is going to do the rest for us. It's going to take that natural language, output a calculation for us. All right, so with that data, we built a couple different reports. We pulled in our training data, and we identified trainings that have below 85% sentiment score, ones that we could potentially remove from our product offering. We analyzed our campaigns. We found the expected profit and the expected profit margin based off the output of that regression model, based off the predicted sales that we were expecting compared to our budgeted spend. And we were able to identify for all of our budgeted campaigns, what's the expected profit, what's the profit margin, and we can take action on that accordingly. And then we talked about how we wanted to generate, or we wanted to extract information from Google web search data to identify hot markets that our company can try to pursue. One of the products in the Power Platform is Power Automate, as we discussed. And Power Automate Desktop allows us to do a ton of RPA type activities where instead of us doing manual repetitive tasks on a day-to-day basis, we can identify and create different flows that run at whatever cadence we specify. That's going to allow us to completely automate that process. And so what I did here in this flow that we created is I automated the process of going and opening a browser, going to trends.google.com to get Google trending data. I automated the entire process where we click on different elements of the UI to change different parameters, to click on different links within that web page. We downloaded that Google trending data from the website, and then we moved the files to a specified location so that we can ingest that into the Power BI environment as well. And so we won't create this whole thing. This probably took 5 minutes to create at most, but when we run this, we'll be able to see what actions occur. It's going to open up a Microsoft Edge browser. It's going to type in machine learning into that into the search bar. It's going to change it to past 90 days. We want to, we want to look at the last 90 days. We want to download that trending data by day. We scroll down in that web browser. We downloaded the by region information as well. We closed the web browser. We took those files. We moved them, renamed them, and now we have a process set in place where every single day or every hour or every minute, if we wanted, we could run this automated process. We completely automated having to go and extract that information ourselves, and we can start to leverage that in our own analysis. That's what we did here, and the output of that is we can start trending or start analyzing trending data and see different hot markets in the country in terms of how often they're reviewing and searching for machine learning. That's one of the main trainings that we teach, and we can start to influence our marketing and sales activities based off that. Okay. All right, and then the last thing here that I'll show, we won't go through the whole demo, but we have our leads and our sales pipeline data that we reviewed in the Power BI environment. And we ran that machine learning model against that, and we know based off each one of our opportunities what the model predicted the probability that lead would turn into a sale. And we want to start analyzing that information, influencing our sales activities accordingly. Okay. So what I did is I pulled in the output of that model, that sales pipeline data. That sales pipeline data, after we applied the model, has a column for our predicted outcome, true or false, binary yes, no, whether that opportunity was going to generate a sale, and what the probability of that is. And so we use that information to show all of the open opportunities that have not already been converted to a sale and what the probability of that sale is. Okay? That's step one. But let's say, hey, I want to start being more proactive about taking action on these opportunities rather than just displaying them. Okay? And so that's where another amazing product in the Power Platform comes into play. And so what we've done here is, let's say in our team, we want to start tracking, just in a really simple SharePoint list, what activities we are doing as a sales team for each one of the opportunities in our CRM. And we're just listing a description for that activity, the date that we completed that activity, and what lead number it's associated with. Okay? Let's say we don't have that ability to do that in our CRM. That's great. That's in a SharePoint list, another Microsoft product. But we want to take that a step further, and we want to create a location directly within our Power BI report to actually generate those records of data and see that information be displayed directly within our report in real time. And so what you can do by using Power Apps is, in about 2 to 3 minutes, you can generate a new application based off the structure of our SharePoint list, and with some very, very minor modifications, no coding, really just moving around different elements of the UI and changing font sizes and whatnot. We can create an application that allows us to see our various records of data once this finishes loading. We can generate new records of data as well, or we can edit any existing records. Okay? And what we'll do is we'll embed that into the our Power BI reports. And what that will look like, if we look at the final report, is in our Power BI report with no coding at all. We can see the predicted probability of conversion for each one of our opportunities, and in real time we can say, all right, we know that we need to take action on this lead. We can generate a new record into our structured application that we just built. So let's say I want to do that for 589699. on today, I just want to say I called the clients. Okay, I'll generate that new record. And the last thing I'll show here for our kind of final part of this solution is now we have a centralized location to capture those activities for our opportunities. And we can use Power Automate to actually automate this process even more. And we can create a flow that says whenever a new record is created or modified in that SharePoint list, we want to refresh our Power BI data set in real time. Okay? Again, no coding at all, literally just filling out these input boxes here. As soon as we type in a record into that application and we click refresh here, once that data set finishes refreshing, will probably be in the next 20 or 30 seconds. That's automatically going to be displayed in our report. We're not going to have to take any other action, and that entire process from start to finish is streamlined through those Power Automate flows. Okay, so lots of, a full start to finish solution there that used every single part of the Power Platform. We ingested data, we applied machine learning models that were pre-built against our data inside of the Power BI web service. We ingested that into our Power BI report. We used various elements of Power Automate to extract data from Google web search data. We built an application to start capturing information in a more structured and systematic way. And throughout that entire process, we've now completed and solved our business problem, used multiple elements of the Power Platform without having to write any code from scratch. Okay? And so that leads to, a discussion. That's obviously pretty amazing functionality where somebody who maybe doesn't have traditional programming experience, traditional IT experience, can now have access to huge amounts of information, very complex AI models and machine learning models, and be able to apply that to their data based off the business problems that they have. And so we are making so many more processes efficient and accessible for a wider group of resources at an organization. Okay? That's definitely the benefit. The challenges that come with that is that there's certainly data governance questions that arise when you're democratizing data in this way, where you're providing ability for folks at different levels of the organization to ingest data, to apply models against that, and to try to take action on that. And so really understanding and making sure that business context is still being applied in a systematic way so that we are actually using the output of these models in a productive, efficient manner to make decisions, as opposed to just trusting what the model says. And also understanding that at this point in time, we're really in kind of the phase one of platforms like the Power Platform or other tools out there of trying to automate the ability to use pre-built models, whether it's machine learning, whether it's AI. All of these products are still in their infancy in this space. This is only going to continue, only going to improve, and there's going to be more and more mechanisms to provide your own business nuance in those pre-built models to adjust them for your own organization, your own unique components of your organization. Right now, a lot of that is still set up in a very systematic way that's doesn't allow for that unique business nuance to be applied. Process will change in the future. It's only going to improve. There's only going to be more mechanisms like this to democratize data in the same way. And so we really just need to, as an organization, understand how is that being applied, how are we accounting for that, and continuing to monitor the market as more tools and more functionalities like what we saw here in the Power Platform become available to folks at really any level of the organization. I'm getting the cue card to wrap up for Q&A, so let's go ahead and let's do that. Perfect. I think we have about 10 minutes for Q&A, so if there are any questions or any portion of that we want to get into deeper, that would be great. Yeah?
Hi, I have a quick question. So generally speaking, 80% of time in data and analytics is spending on data cleaning, right? So I don't know how does the Power BI do the data cleaning, or you just feed it with a clean data?
Yeah, so we definitely skipped over that a little bit. So in the data flows that we created, just for the sake of time, that I created before this Power Query interface is Power BI's ETL engine, and this is where we're going to be able to do most of our data cleaning and transformation. So we're going to be able to modify records, we're going to be able to account for null values, we're going to be able to change the structure of our data. That is still more of a manual process of understanding how to effectively clean and make transformations to your data. But that's all done in this Power Query interface. Again, it's a very digestible, intuitive, low code, no code interface within each one of these applications. You do that data cleaning there, and then after we load that information, that's when we apply those machine learning models against that already clean data that we've specified. And then even above and beyond that, we saw for some of these, or for the models that we applied, it will specify various elements of what it did for, hey, if you saw a null value in your outcome column, like what was the mechanism used to clean that inside of the model? And so it's basically has like some guardrails and safety mechanisms in place that it's helping you make sure that you have valid, applicable data that you're feeding into the model as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You talked a bit about the performance threshold. How have you seen business leaders today, or the citizen developers today, use that in order to drive utilization for those models, or stepping away from the model and in favor of something else?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because it kind of gets to the challenges with a solution like this is the business understanding of the model itself, and whether you should be favoring a model that or weighting precision in your model more than recall or vice versa. And it's really understanding the business problem, whether you want to make sure that you don't have any false positives in your data and you want to identify all of those and take action on them, or vice versa or whatnot. So while there's not a lot of mechanisms into the platform right now to handle that, to your question, I think that's where that organizational communication and sort of governance around, hey, what is the business problem? How do we fine tune these models based off our business problem? That's where there's still a lot of manual intervention that's necessary to actually interpret these models, interpret these findings appropriately based on what you're trying to calculate. So I think each organization is going to handle it differently depending on their nuances and the business problem itself. But that's a great example of, you still need at this point some manual analysis of the output to make sure that what you're applying is actually makes sense for the business problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, up here.
How receptive is this model to senior managers?
Say that again?
How receptive is this models from Power BI to senior managers?
I think it's going to be different on the organization. I think it's going to be different on the business context. So I think for a situation like this, let's say it's a pretty small scope and you have a sales and marketing team and you're just trying to improve some process within that team. I think each organization is going to handle that differently, and I think if anything, we're only becoming more efficient in like an exercise like this of trying to generate insights into our data. I think there's still going to be at least a few years where senior leadership is always going to weight, as it should. We're always going to value the manual process and the understanding that comes from years and years of doing programming and modeling, like many folks in this room. So I think at this point, it really depends on the business problem and whether it's mission critical to the business. If it's not, I think there's amazing outputs and amazing outcomes for using these machine learning models, depending on the use case. If it's a decision that's going to be modifying or influencing millions of dollars of sales or spend that we might have, I think there's still going to be years and years and years where organization leaders are going to rely on their analytics team, rely on the modeling as they should, as opposed to using anything automated just so that they know that the business context is being applied appropriately.
So my question, sort of an extension of that, is most of the people in this room, we've spent an embarrassing amount of time learning how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And what do you see our role going forward as this technology is democratized? Because things like the relationship between precision and type 1, type 2 error, and that's automated, or when your model tells you which variables are important in regression and takes care of collinearity.
Yeah.
Like, those are things that typically we take a lot of knowledge about the how it works, but as the tool is encompassing more and more of that, what role does the data scientist play?
I think it's interpretation for the business, certainly. And at this point, there's not many mechanisms to modify the models that are being applied. I expect that to continue to increase in the future, but there's still always going to be a role for data scientists with that knowledge, with that understanding of how to effectively model data. There's still going to be a need for interpretation of taking these findings, making sure that it's being interpreted correctly, make sure that we're configuring and modifying the models appropriately for our business nuance. And so I think there's going to be even more emphasis on spending less time in Python, more time interpreting the results for the business, and making sure that the contextual elements of your business are being applied effectively within automated components of the model.
I have a follow-up question to that is the flip side, right? Because we have a lot more citizen developers than we do data scientists. We can't afford data scientists, right? And that's what this is, the target audience for this is citizen developers. How is the College of Business training citizen developers, future business leaders to watch out for those guardrails and say, look, don't do stupid stuff because this is going to give you a number no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's your job to not do stupid stuff.
And how much of that do we need to teach them?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be an interesting evolution of the industry, really, is the augmentation of automation and automated models, but still, applying those guardrails, still applying that data governance, and still making sure that what is being created is actually effective and actually applicable to the organization. I think that's going to be a huge evolution of the entire industry, really, is how businesses account for that and how folks are trained and how there are guardrails and mechanisms in place to review that.
One example that comes to mind is when you have on this sentiment analysis, right? I mean, you have to forget about barrier languages, right? When somebody in Japan says it was good, it means something totally different than when somebody in the US says it was good. I mean, the translation may be the same, but the sentiment behind it could be dramatically different. And so when you look at, model validations and how do you really, really understand, you have to have human behind it.
Certainly.
Really looking at and minding those details.
And like I said, I think this is really phase one of products and functionalities like this, where there's going to be more and more ability to configure and do more of that granular review, as opposed to a lot of it is automated and it spits out a number, and you do get a lot of information of how it spit out that number, but there's less mechanisms in place to fine tune that. I expect that to only increase as time goes on, but certainly, a very valid point. And depending on the severity of the business problem, you might decide, hey, this influences our decision, this is a starting point, but we still need that manual, data mining, data review, so on and so forth. Yep.
Very good question on the data mining. So when Larry Porter emails us all tomorrow and says, any other comments about the symposium, does Power BI have the capability to take all of those open-ended comments and then group them by categories? So like, hey, here's a giant list of all the categories that talked about breakfast. Here's a giant list of all the categories that talked about the first speaker, and then it just breaks it out. So you pull the verbatims from it, or is that still?
There is keyword extraction, where it will try to parse through those free-form comments and extract keywords accordingly. I would not say that there's not a lot of mechanisms to modify that in the current point in time, to say, I want to make these specific categories. Somebody talked about food, and somebody talked about the air conditioning, and somebody talked about the instructors or whatnot. There's basically pre-built models that you don't have much influence to manipulate at this point. As time goes on, I expect that's just going to continue to improve. Good question, though.
Right, so I assume you'll be around at lunch.
Yeah, certainly.
So you can hunt Gabe down there if you have any additional questions. Otherwise, Larry had asked me to fill these out. Now they look pretty primitive. But if you can fill these out and hand them in before you leave, Larry uses them to sort of guide the information that we present at these, and it's a really useful tool for
So
us.
there's Power Automate functionality to, if we scan all these in, to extract the information.
I
So,
think Larry needs to be in
yeah.
here. So thank you very much, and thank you again to Gabe, our
I appreciate it.